Well, now to a fascinating and significant story the media have all but ignored. South Africa is a diverse country, but the South African government would like to make it much less diverse. An embattled minority of farmers, mostly Afrikaans speaking, is being targeted in a wave of barbaric and horrifying murders. But instead of protecting them, the government just passed a law allowing it to seize their farms without any compensation, based purely on their ethnicity, and distribute those farms to more favored groups. Thousands have already migrated out of the country, but they've struggled to attract any sympathy abroad for some reason. ROETS is deputy CEO of AfriForum. It's a South Africa civil rights group. He was just in the United States to meet with a number of government officials. He also took a moment to talk to us. Here's part of what he said. Ernst Roets joins us now. Mr. Roets, thanks for coming on.
Thank you very much.
So you describe in this book a disorganized but in some sense intentional campaign to crush a racial minority within your country, and the government seems on board with it. Is that an overstatement?
Well, what the book is about is it's about government complicity in the scourge of farm attacks and farm murders that we've seen in South Africa. So we know in the last 2 decades there's been, according to government statistics, which we believe, we have reason to say that it's maybe downplayed a little, there's been about 2 farm attacks every day and 2 farm murders every week in South Africa. And in the book, I highlight actually 10 different reasons why we believe the South African government is complicit. And it stretches from reasons including the fact that as these attacks have worsened, for example, in 2007, there was a 25% increase in these attacks. And then the South African government responded saying, we're not going to release any more statistics about this. Then also, which is very concerning, is the hate speech in South Africa. So we have, that's the title of the book as well, Kill the Boer, which is a very popular song, which is still being sung in South Africa. It was sung just the other day. So it's sung at political rallies, and of course, Boer referring to a particular cultural group in South Africa.
Right.
We have songs like Shoot the Boer, which is a different song. So there are a variety of ways in which we believe...
But I thought that hate speech was now a crime punishable by prison time in South Africa. Are any of the people who say this arrested?
Well, there's a bill on the table to have hate speech declared a crime punishable by prison time. But if you look at the motivation around this, it's very clear that I think those in government who are pushing this don't regard this as hate speech. As a matter of fact, they've been arguing that it's not hate speech in courts. So they would argue that they have a right to sing about killing farmers, and then they would say it's an expression of freedom of speech.
So now the government has announced that it plans to pursue a policy of taking land away from people on the basis of their skin color. Do you think they'll do that?
Well, that's what was adopted in our parliament in February. A motion was adopted that the property rights clause in the South African constitution has to be changed to allow for expropriation of private property without compensation. So the state president, Cyril Ramaphosa, said that this would turn South Africa into the ultimate paradise and the Garden of Eden. And Deputy President David Mabuza even went further, saying that, basically threatening white farmers that if they do not voluntarily hand over their land to black people, then there would be a violent takeover. So the situation is very dire in South Africa. But the good news is that there's still a process that has to be followed. And that's why we are in the United States.
What I find so striking is the response from everyone else around the world is almost never covered in the American media. There's a sense that the people being murdered deserve it because of what their ancestors did. And the international community is similarly silent. Have you met with any government officials here in Washington about what's happening in your country?
Well, that's why we are here. We are about to meet with some government officials, and it's very unfortunate, the situation that you've just mentioned. So there's, especially in South Africa, there's a hierarchy of recognition. So some people, when they are the victims, it's all over the news and you hear about it frequently, and other people, as especially, I think, especially farmers in South Africa, white farmers in particular, when they would be tortured to death and it would receive very little news coverage, and that's unfortunately the situation abroad as well, which is why we are very grateful to be having this.
So a government official in Australia said publicly, maybe we ought to allow asylum to people being persecuted for their skin color in your country. And he was basically laughed at and then attacked by your government for saying that.
Yes, he was attacked, and They then said that he shouldn't say that because AfriForum was providing them with false information, while the information that we are quoting is government statistics. So that is the situation. Whoever speaks out against this, just for being in the United States, we've been accused of treason. We've had people threatening us, saying they'll wait for us at the airport when we come back and they'll attack us and so forth. We had the state president today in Parliament calling on us to go back to South Africa. So whenever you speak out against this, there's a very serious backlash.
This is not what Nelson Mandela wanted.
No, it's the exact opposite than what he wanted. He publicly spoke about a free country in which people were not judged by the color of their skin, and he even wanted farmer tax to be a priority crime. He said that when he was president, and when his presidency was over, they deprioritized it.
So you just watched something like this happen in a neighboring country, Zimbabwe, which went from being one of the richest in Africa to the poorest in the world because of farm attacks and because of the theft of private property. Is the ANC, the ruling party in South Africa, aware of that lesson?
Yeah. Well, they are, but you know that saying, real communism has never been tried. That's what they keep saying. So it failed in Zimbabwe, it failed in Cuba, it failed in Venezuela, it failed in Russia, it failed in China, in all of those countries. And they're basically saying that we're going to try the same thing, but this time it's going to work.
So last question. It's considered basically immoral in the United States to talk to you or to hear stories like this for reasons that nobody ever bothers really to explain, but it's just understood. If you could speak to our media, or the people who are dismissing your claims as false, what would you say?
Well, I think there are three things. Firstly, everything we say is fact-based. It's based on research. But in terms of what we hope to achieve and what people can do, people who want to invest in South Africa, we want them to call on the South African government to say, listen, you are calling on us to invest in your country, but you want to expropriate those investments. Number two, we are speaking with the US government and asking them to put pressure on the South African government, which could be done in a variety of ways. And number three, members of the public and members of the media, the best thing that you can do to help us is to talk about this, to talk about it on public platforms, and in that way to continue to put pressure on the South African government not to continue with this policy.
Just to tell the truth. I agree. Mr. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being here.